the Film Task Force is made up with representatives from the City of Roswell, from Visit Roswell at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and from the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce. And really quickly, I'd like to just provide an overview of the successes we've had year over year. The task force was established in 2019. We began tracking the successes of lead production and conversion in 2019, and we moved forward from there. And so what we're really trying to do is get a handle on benchmarking and where we see growth. And in fiscal year 21, we generated a total of 125 film production leads. That represents a growth of 166% over fiscal year 20. Site visits conducted when location scouts or producers come into market, we conducted 48 of those. That represents a growth of 336 over fiscal year 20. And let me just say this, we don't expect that percentage to continue to grow in that direction year over year. But more than anything, I think what it shows is that when you establish a system that's working appropriately, it does really produce results. That's a conversion rate of one productions from leads of 38.4%. Kind of rule of thumb is if you're converting 20 to 25, that's successful. So we're happy with that number. Most interestingly, we've won 38 productions in fiscal year 21, which represents an 1,800 growth over fiscal year 20. So definitely doing something right, moving in the right direction. That's a conversion rate of 30.4% of leads generated. We're really excited about this bottom stat here because this really shows us something that's critical to the success of this. Of the site visits we get in market, we've won 79% of those. So the key is if we get these folks into town, we have a really good shot of walking away with a one production. And this is a good number as well. This is direct investment from those efforts. So in this previous year, we generated $567,940. That's predominantly going to homeowners and business owners who have brought film productions into their houses. It's tough for us to track economic impact. We're still trying to get a handle on that formula. We can't speak exactly to the folks who are putting gas in their tanks, dining in the restaurants. We do know we can track wrap parties, things where productions are coming in, ordering hors d'oeuvres, entrees, desserts, and actually wrapping the production. But as far as kind of that spending throughout the community, it's pretty tough for us to get a handle on. But that 567,000 number, that's pretty considerable when you think those are homeowners and business owners that are making that. What we're bringing forth for consideration is funding an actual marketing plan. The successes that we have experienced from this system have really come from the system we've established and how well it's working, and also word of mouth advertising. Location scouts telling those within their network that Roswell is film friendly and has a great program in place. And as well as some marketing we're doing on the Visit Roswell site through Chris with the City of Roswell and her permitting and those different things. But at the end of the day, we really haven't told the world that Roswell is here and ready for film. And so we would love to consider putting some dollars into that marketing plan. And we would do that utilizing a combination of print advertising, digital advertising, and something very tech-focused called geoframing, which I'll talk about in a second here. We would ask for print to include ads in the Georgia Film and Television Sourcebook. That's essentially the guidebook for productions in Georgia. Print ads in a mix of industry publications, which I will highlight here. Digital to include placement on Movie Maker Magazine's websites and through newsletters, and on Oz Magazine, which is a local film production publication in the state of Georgia. And then geoframing of 3 area film studios where we know a lot of film productions are occurring. The total consideration for this investment would be to the tune of around $50,000 to be spent within this fiscal year of 22 by June 30th of 2022. This is simply an example of what a 2/3 page ad mock-up could look like. Of course, we could work with the Film Task Force Committee, would work together to design these ads, to place them, to figure out what the messaging could look like. I think it's important, though, that we play to our strengths, which we know we offer same-day response, expedited permitting. We know that a vacant jail is very high in demand. We have a great historic downtown, homes of all styles of architecture and neighborhoods, miles and trails, and of course our Chattahoochee River, which is a fantastic natural amenity. Here's an example of what a half-page horizontal could look like if it were in a particular publication with print, again playing to those strengths. Here's an example of what a long banner could look like throughout a variety of websites that are film specific. And here are some of the publications that we would love for this to consider. We know this based on our expertise at this point and what the industry is reading. We've also run this list through the Georgia Department of Economic Development's film office and have gotten validation. But this is Oz Magazine, the Georgia Film Guide and Sourcebook, Compass Magazine, which is the official publication of the Location Managers Guild International, American Cinematographer, and Movie Maker Magazine. So the idea here really is two parts: to saturate the brand, to let people know that we are film friendly, that Roswell is here, and then of course to drive business and generate leads that convert to productions. With geoframing, this is a use of technology where we would actually go in and utilize a company that sets coordinates based on physical locations of film studios. They map out the entire location, and through movement technology with iOS apps, and apps on your Samsung phone, Apple phone, whatever you have. There are about 90,000 apps that utilize movement and GPS technology where we can hone in on the actual individuals that are going into these studios to work, and then we can directly retarget them through direct mail campaigns and digital marketing. The exciting thing about this is we know these are actual people in the Metro Atlanta that are producing films and working in the industry. That's an example of Tyler Perry Studios. This is Eagle Rock Productions, just down the road. We would map out this entire area. And this is Pinewood Studios, formerly now known as Trillic, down at Fayetteville. They see a high volume as well. The consideration would be 3 runs of a half page in Oz Magazine, 2 runs of a 2/3 page in Movie Maker Magazine, a 3-page spread annually in the Georgia Film Guide, 6 months of geoframing those 3 studios, 2 times for an actual direct mail campaign that would be distributed through that database that is sent to us from those geoframing efforts, 3 times with a digital banner in Oz Magazine's website, 3 times with an e-blast directly to industry professionals through Movie Maker Magazine's e-blast, a full page run twice in the LMGI Compass Magazine, and then a 6-page ad 4 times in American Cinematographer. Through these efforts, we think we'll see great success in not only getting the word out that we are ready for film and do a good job of working with productions, but we think it's also going to greatly drive business into the community as a result of these efforts. And with that said, we appreciate the consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Great presentation. Is there a seasonality to this business as to when people are picking locations, or is it pretty much year-round?
Year-round. And I think the benefit of Georgia is they have access to, first of all, a pretty nice climate with mild winters, but also with the immense amount of film studios we have. Even if they're doing the majority of their filming in the studios, there's a great need for a lot of those production companies to continue to go out into the Metro Atlanta communities to seek out neighborhoods, parks, natural amenities, and things of that nature. From everything we've tracked, we're working pretty much 3 leads a week from January to December.
Councilor Employment.
There goes. Thank you. Great presentation, and definitely impressive growth. I would like to see that continued growth. Here's my question. As I saw the selling points, most of them were just features that Roswell offers. 2 of them were process related, which was expedited permitting and same-day response. It looked like those were the two items, and it leads to being one of the most film-friendly locations in Georgia. My question for you, is there anything we can do to be number 1, most friendly? Is there anything we can do to be more expedited? Anything just to really make it easier and more attractive as this being the key destination?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, kudos to the team that's really a part of this system. One of the things that we've said from the get-go is as soon as a film lead comes in, no matter what we're working on, we drop it and we get back to the location scout or the producer. And the communication between Visit Roswell and the city of Roswell, the Roswell Police Department, Fire Department, is really turnkey, and it moves very quickly. And that is something I think that we own that a lot of other communities don't guarantee and actually shy away from. So that's a big selling point and something for us to continue, I would say, to focus on. I think with growth down the road, some ideas that could be considered are additional, incentive plans. I mean, anything that basically makes it easier for a production company to want to continue to come back to a destination. Those are the things that are really going to light them up. And at the end of the day, the hope is, and we're even seeing this now, we're having repeat scouts come back that say, we don't even want to consider other communities. We just want to come back to Roswell because you guys are doing such a good job. This film's going to look a little bit different than the last one, but we know you've got that asset, so go find it for us. But I'd say if we continue to focus on those things and we continue to hold each other accountable for that response, for the quick permitting that we're able to provide, we're only going to continue to grow from there, I would say.
Excellent. Then I appreciate that and definitely want to see that continues. And I just ask if you see any other opportunities to really even improve further and be that much better and easier to deal with, and just please making sure that you're letting us know and just whatever we can do to make it happen.
Absolutely, appreciate that.
And I think our permitting process, we usually apply for, and it's very easy to get into for users and easy for me if I'm not even in my office to permit and to work with them, and they all have access to it, so we can all talk inside the system as well. So right now, it's really, really great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, great presentation last week, and last week, like, Wednesday night, that's amazing. Actually hit Tyler Perry's phone, but.
Yeah, not out of the realm of that. It's possible.
Exactly, so, yeah,
What kind of, two questions really, what kind of lead times are the films usually looking at? Are they usually planning 6 months ahead, a year ahead, or even like 2 weeks, so?
I would say it's all over the place. On some occasions, we will have scouts that call and, there's a sense of urgency because they need to find a location to potentially shoot in 1 or 2 weeks. On other occasions, we've got them that are maybe 3 months out that are very transparent with us and upfront, who say, hey, just to let you know, we are scouting other destinations. We really, like the idea of filming in Roswell. We need this particular asset, and it needs to look this way. We're considering all options, and, I think our follow-up's pretty good with it, too. We continuously stay on their radar. Ted does a great job with follow-up. And, if it's something that's a little bit of a ways out, they have no problem saying, hey, circle back with us in a month. We're really compiling right now. But I would say, it's probably realistic. Anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months is pretty standard.
Yeah, okay, good. And my other question, I think we've talked about this a little bit, it's really just more of an idea, is just marketing Roswell services back to the film studios as far as catering and lighting and things that, resources that we have, even, actors and homes and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think that's, and that's kind of phase 2, which we want to continue to build. It's the service providers.
Councilmember Judy.
Thank you, Michael. Ted, Andy, crew, you just kill it every day, and appreciate all you do. I know it's a buzz for all the Roswell citizens to say, this is filming here this week, and this is filming here, and then you hear some really crazy things. So.
Yeah.
Baywatch is filming here. No, they're not. Anyway, quick question. This might be a Ryan question. Is this coming out of hotel motel tax, or is this coming out of general fund?
Ryan, you want to?
This is coming out of Hotel Motel Fund. We have a portion of that funding that's dedicated to tourism product development. We can also give it to the CVB for tourism promotion. We've built up some funds in that portion of about $190,000, so we have that funding available for this.
Great, thank you.
And I apologize for not being here in the beginning of the presentation, but I do want to point out that we had a line item in the budget that was requested, and when I presented the budget, I said that I would have, let's earmark this $50,000, but we want to know exactly where this $50,000 is going to be spent, because this is in conjunction with our North Fulton Chamber of Commerce. This is our CVB, and it's also with the City of Roswell and the Mayor's Movie Task Force. So what I wanted to do is set that money aside in the budget. It's earmarked. There was a line item. And my request was that the Mayor's Movie Task Force would bring forward the request. Andy is presenting it, and I certainly hope you will all support it because it's a wonderful, positive revenue stream for the city of Roswell that I think that we have just continually increased that revenue, and we've got the opportunity to continue that as well. So I think that it's a wonderful revenue stream that we've got. And Andy, you tell me, and maybe Michael Fisher, it's relatively painless. I mean, we have to give and take a little bit on it as a city, on city facilities, and then we've got residents that are using their homes. We've got businesses that are using their homes. And so we've got a combination of all of those, and I think that it's a win-win for the city of Roswell.
It's a fun process to work, and I would say based on everything we've been tracking for the past couple of years, it's all positive feedback, and a lot of the residents and business owners want to continue to see growth in it. Really no negativity at this point that we've tracked.
I think the answer from me and Andy would probably be painless. The answer from Ted and Chris might be terribly painful, but they do a lot of the legwork along the way. So.
Right.
I think we've learned that you really have to be very flexible because today we have a film in the jail in a couple days, and today they said, oh, it's going to rain, we want to do it a day early, so we all have to learn to pivot, don't really like that word so much, but pivot and move quickly, and I think Ted and I have learned, if nothing else, we've learned that through filming.
Any other questions? Councilmember Tyser.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve this request for $50,000 for the Film Roswell Marketing Program. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is consideration for the mayor and/or interim city administrator to sign a memorandum of understanding between the city of Roswell and the Roswell Historical Society. The MOU that we have, we're updating and getting all of our MOUs in order. This MOU kind of maps out the various roles and obligations for both the Roswell Historical Society and the city. I won't go through all of the MOU, but just let me point out quickly here that the Historical Society shall maintain, its nonprofit status. It'll record, preserve, and accept historically significant materials and artifacts. It shall provide access to those archives, education, information, and events. Shall provide historical information as needed for the city of Roswell to reference, and to coordinate with the city of Roswell for display of certain items and references regarding the city of Roswell's historic properties, and they will maintain cataloging and inventory control. For the city side of the MOU, we shall provide for the exclusive use of the Roswell Historical Society, the upstairs portion of the Roswell Cultural Arts Center for a library and archives. We shall provide funds to the Roswell Historical Society as determined in the city of Roswell annual budget. Shall provide adequate security, utilities, and air conditioning and dehumidification and necessary maintenance of the facility, and the city shall maintain insurance to cover the facility and the contents. This term is for a one-year period from July 1 of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. It will renew automatically for one-year terms after that unless there's any notification given. So that is the MOU. Is there any questions regarding this? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Michael. Just have a question. Have they moved in? Have they been able to move into the entire space upstairs where the previous tenant had occupying some space towards the back there?
Let me let Director Leatherman talk to you about the facility.
And then also, I understand there was some work that needed to be done on that, on those premises, if that work's been done.
Thanks for the question. The site walk with the Historical Society is scheduled for Thursday this week, to go through the improvements that were approved in the budget process by Mayor and Council. It was about $150,000, mostly aesthetic, flooring, paint, ceiling tiles, and lighting replacement. We're going to run through that scope with them, mayor and council. Once we have that out to bid and then received, we'll start doing the work. So the space has been vacated, but the work hasn't been done yet.
What's the schedule once it's approved?
The schedule will be based on the bidding process. So once we do the site walk and we understand if there's any investment that the Historical Society is interested in making in the site itself, we'll have a better idea of the overall schedule and scope at that time. The trick is if they want to do any sort of improvements to the facility that they're going to fund, we'll have to build that into the schedule, and then we'll know more at that time. So that's what we're working on Thursday.
Any other questions? I have a motion for this MOU with the Roswell Historical Society. Motion to approve by Mayor Henry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember G. All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consideration to establish the local hire job incentive program. So this is kind of a continuation. We had a committee meeting, then we moved to a council meeting, but had some additional information at the council meeting, so we brought it back to a final committee meeting to kind of go over the final program with you and the qualifications. I kind of did like last time, and just I have them up on the screen. It's not pretty, but it's something that we can talk over as we're going through this. The purpose of the local hire job incentive program, of course, is to encourage the hiring of Roswell residents for high-quality jobs within the city. It'll be for 1 year. It'll be effective for 1 year, which we talked about before. We'll see how it goes at the end of that year, or when there's a total of $75,000 in the tax credits have been given, because we didn't want it just to be open-ended forever. So I think we got those comments from before. Excuse me. So here's the qualifications. As we work through this, the businesses must hire a Roswell resident. That hire must be getting paid a minimum annual salary of $50,000 a year. It's a minimum of 35 hours per week. We're looking for full-time jobs when we do this, and they have to offer health insurance benefits consistent with what's offered to other existing programs. Only residents that are hired as of the effective date would be eligible for the business to get the credit. The second item is the Roswell resident must remain employed with the employer and maintain residency in the city of Roswell for 1 year before the incentive is paid. The third qualification is the business must be located within the city limits of Roswell and possess the city of Roswell, of course, occupation tax certificate. And then the last one is the business must be current on all of its city accounts, the utilities, property tax, and things of that nature. The award will be a tax credit. It will be $500 for each job that meets the eligible criteria, and that award amount will be paid in the form of a credit to the business's future occupation tax liability, and the credit may carry forward to future years until it's fully used up. So I think that's what we have talked about in looking at this local hire job incentive program, and I'll open it up for any questions. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So I have a couple comments, and it goes back to our previous discussion, so I think no real surprises, which is just ultimately, if we look at what the average wages in not actually just Roswell, but even all of Fulton, that this amount is significantly lower than that average wage, and that's where I have concerns. Are we incentivizing the businesses to really have and create higher paying jobs? And I don't see this as a job creation aspect, which I think is something that we should be looking to do. And in addition to that, something I wanted to call out, and I guess, Mr. Luckett, I guess I'll have the question towards you. I realize as I'm reading this, it's if the company offers health insurance to nobody, then they would still be eligible for this as well. Is that right? Because it says, at first I was thinking it was, they must offer health insurance benefits, but then I realized consistent with what is offered to existing employees. So does that mean if there are some existing employees that receive no health benefits, then that satisfies the criteria?
Yes.
Okay, and so, yeah, I mean, just, as I mentioned, I'm all for an incentive to more jobs and more high-paying jobs in Roswell, but some concerns I have here as we look at it is, first of all, as this council discussed, it is not for creation of new jobs, it is just backfilling, so it could just be all backfilling roles. And number two, the salary is well below the average wages. And thirdly, the fact that the incentive even goes out to companies that aren't even offering health insurance to their employees. And it's just, as we look at Alpharetta and we look at Milton with what their goals are and how they've done such a great job of really bringing a lot of high-paying jobs where the residents there can afford to actually work there. That's the direction I'd prefer to go, whereas in this is not doing that. I think if anything, this is just helping and incentivizing for jobs to pay below what's needed to live in the area as well as without health insurance, et cetera. So those are my concerns. I'd love for the opportunity to fine tune this and for this to be a really great incentive for some great jobs to come to Roswell, but I just don't see that happening the way it's currently set up.
Councilmember Tyson.
Thank you. So as we spoke at the last committee meeting, my concern was that if we set up enough gates, we'd create a whole lot of nothing. And so I think we did a good job of narrowing things down to fewer gates. And I've since taken a look at the salary number, and instead of looking at just a number, I thought about what kind of jobs would I like to see come here. And I think one of them that I used as an example was a nurse. I think nursing would be a nice profession to see the hospitals bring, or doctor's offices or whoever that could relocate here, bring in a nurse. And so if I take a nurse's salary at about $35 an hour, that's roughly $75,000. And so if you were going to ask me today, do I still agree with the 50? It was a number we threw out at that meeting, but when I look at the kinds of jobs, it seems to me that probably 75 is a number that makes a little bit more sense based on the kind of person or the kind of position we'd like to have. As far as the health insurance piece, I don't remember that being one of the gates. I'm sure it was. There's a whole ton of federal law that tells you, that runs that for us. I'm not sure we need to spend a whole lot of time on telling people they have to change their health care plans or create health care plans where they don't have them. But again, if you're hiring people in that $75,000 range, you've probably already got a business and a plan. But I think the federal government requires you to have that if you're running more than 30 hours or something like that. So I'd like to leave that to other levels of government to deal with, but could definitely see us moving that number to around 75.
I think part of the thought was, when we were talking about insurance, was we don't want them to take this incentive to pay somebody more money just so the company gets the incentive, but then not offer that employee the insurance benefits, so their cost would be lower, and yet they would still get a credit for it, I think is one of the things that we were thinking about. So we didn't want healthcare to be an issue in the incentive.
My point is, if we've said it's a minimum of 35 hours, I think there's already law that says what you have to provide. So I think that's a concern that I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on. That's my point.
Councilmember G.
Thank you. When I brought this forward, it was to really get something moving to create some incentives. I've heard from a bunch of companies that, hey, look, y'all don't have enough arrows in your quiver. So I could go to the 75 minimum number based upon Councilman Tiser's statement there. I think a nurse is a good, example, and there's a lot of others that would be employed in the city of Roswell at that. I don't want this to be an elitist program. I think it should be one for Roswell businesses and Roswell residents, and I think 75,000 is probably a good number. As far as the insurance goes, if, I guess we could figure out the 35 hours thing in the federal. Again, this was more about getting something done and moving it down the road, not kicking the can, trying to figure out where we're going. So I would like to get this moving this evening and kind of quit messing with it.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Michael. On the health insurance, I think it's also company size that may drive some of that, how many employees you have, and we may want to consider that. But if smaller companies may not be required to provide health insurance, however, if we just keep that in there, that it's consistent with whatever's offered to other employees, I don't see a problem with that.
Councilmember Palermo.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just saying, I would also be comfortable with moving it to 75,000 as a minimum. I think that's probably consistent, with a nurse and then also some other starting salaries in other fields. I would like to look at it again after a year, 6 months or a year, and see what kind of participation we're having. With is it 75,000? Yeah, that we're allowing, works out to about 1,500 jobs. So if we're not getting anywhere near that, then we might want to look at adjusting it. If we have many more than that, we might want to adjust it higher. So I think just having a planned evaluation will help us see what the right number is.
Councilmember Palermo.
So, I do appreciate the discussion for potential compromise from the 50 up to the 75. I'd say I'm still concerned with potential loopholes, et cetera, around the health insurance aspect. So I'd actually like to propose a compromise that what I'd like to see is either it's a minimum of $75,000 if the employee is offered health insurance, or it is the average, the county average that Mr. Luckett had provided if they're not providing health insurance. To Mr. Tiser's point, I think in reality, because of the 35-hour minimum, we're going to see that they all have the health insurance. That'd be the hope. In which case, I think we could feel pretty good about giving that incentive for the 75,000. But if they are going to be not offering it, which I think would be a rare case, that's when I'd rather see it go into actually what the county average wages are, which is still probably below the average in Roswell. Because again, my goal is to really increase the salaries of Roswell residents.
Any other comments or questions? We have a motion on this item.
So motion to move forward with, if the company offers health insurance, then it's $75,000. And if they do not offer health insurance to the employee, then it is the county average that Mr. Luckett provided us.
All right, so we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ryan. Next item on the agenda is discussion of a proposal to create public art on a city-owned facility. This is an item that was brought a couple months back. We were waiting on some questions to be answered. Oh, first of all, let me point out, I have on the front of our agenda item that it's funded entirely by private funds. However, I put public funds on the financial analysis. It is not public funds. It is private funds, so go with the one on the front because that is correct. So I fixed it in one place and I didn't on the other place. But anyway, this was a recommendation or a request by a citizen, Ryan Pernice, to have some public art put on one of the traffic control boxes. And according to, based on our policy, you all ultimately need to approve that. So there was a couple of questions that were brought up before I bring it back to the council meeting, and the first one was how long would the painting last? The answer is we don't know. After talking with the artist, she looked into it some more and has determined that really she hasn't had any fade away yet to the point where we can't use them. So rather than just leaving that as the answer, what we decided on is the Roswell Arts Fund and myself, or city designee, will be out. We'll go at 6-month intervals, and we'll just meet and go out there and take a look at it. And as long as it's holding up and it's doing well, we'll leave it just like it is. If the time comes to where it needs some touch-up, the artist is actually going to be providing touch-up paint to match all of the colors. So it could be touched back up. The next question was who'd be responsible for decommissioning of it. I asked Mr. Pernice about that, and he felt like if we could partner with that since he's funding the whole project. So I went back and talked to our transportation director, and actually Roswell Transportation takes care of all of those cabinets anyway, and they have the cleaning materials and the stuff the people to keep those clean and to recondition them if we need to. So our proposal would be that the decommissioning would take place by the city at that point to where it just wasn't worth keeping it on the container anymore, and Mr. Roth explained that that's kind of fine for their work and what they do and the people they have anyway. And then the last item that you asked me was what will it look like? And I've got a screenshot of examples. The artist doesn't go through and actually do a concept I think she creates when she gets to whatever object she's painting, but it will be one of these in abstract. We were worried about certain pictures or advertisements or anything that might show up like that. But it's just an abstract type art that will go on the traffic control box. So I think those were the questions that were brought up, and if you all are still good with that, we're approved already to move it to the next mayor and council meeting. I just wanted to make sure you got the answers to these before I put those back on the agenda. So by consensus, if y'all are good with that, you'll see it again at the next council meeting. Thank you all. The next item on the agenda is Charles Alford is bringing consideration to reallocate Round 1 Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funding in the amount of $60,000 to rental and utility assistance at Homestretch. Both of these next two are actually reallocations of funds that have already been funded. Charles?
Okay, so these funds were allocated to a variety of nonprofits and city departments back in November of 2020 as part of our community development block grant. Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funds. Homestretch received $100,000. That was for $60,000 for after-school and daycare services. And then they also received $40K of that for job training. They've been able to spend the $40K for job training and a little bit of education services. However, with the increase in virtual learning opportunities and the emergence of the Delta variant, they found a lot of their residents are not wanting to put their kids back in school, and they're taking advantage of those virtual opportunities. And so they're asking to reallocate these funds to rental assistance. And when we initially opened up this application back in, I guess, August 2020, HUD wasn't very clear on whether we could use it for rental assistance. They've since come back and clarified that we can. And Homestretch has identified that as a priority need, and they're requesting that we reallocate these funds to that need. If you guys approved it, we would need, because of HUD, it qualifies as a substantial amendment to our annual action plan, so we would need to do a public comment period, and I'd be able to bring a resolution to approve the reallocation to the next mayor and council meeting.
Any questions for Mr. Alford? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, and they do a good job. I just have a question back to when was this part of the group that we voted on and was scored based on whether they had the total amount of funds available for the project? Thank you.
Was this number 1 or number 2? It's round 1.
Yes, it was, we did it under our round 1. They actually received, let's see, we had to split it because we knew about round 3 was coming down the line, and you guys sort of earmarked it in that resolution to fully fund their full $100,000 request, but the majority of it's round 1.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm thinking of round 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Alford? Councilmember Judy?
I'm just gonna say motion to approve.
A motion by Councilmember Judy to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyson. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 7 is consideration to reallocate round 1 Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus funding in the amount of $2,244.26 to virtual programming at the Adult Recreation Center. Charles?
Yes, in the same vein as the last request, Rec and Parks was allocated funding in that first round of allocations. They received funding for the Adaptive Friendship Camp as well as the Adult Recreation Center virtual programming. Both of those activities involved them purchasing nominal air filtration systems, and those were estimated at that time. They actually came in under budget, and so they have additional funds remaining. I know it's not a huge amount relative to everything we talk about here, but it still qualifies as a substantial amendment, which is why coming to you guys, we need to do a resolution. If you approve, we would reallocate those funds to additional virtual programming, which staff has identified as a need.
Any questions? I have a motion. Councilmember Tyson.
Motion to approve,
Motion approved by Councilmember Tyson.
especially the 26 cents.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. Thanks. Next item on the agenda is under finance. It's item number 8, and it's the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding update. Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As you probably remember, we were here back on August 23rd for a Mayor and Council work session, and we provided you with just an overview of the guidelines for how we can use the ARPA funds, and just to kind of a recap, I guess, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed by Congress and signed by the President back in March of 2021. Through that several trillion-dollar act, there is a state and local fiscal recovery fund program, and through that, the city of Roswell is slated to receive $11.3 million to help recover from the effects of COVID-19. And the U.S. Treasury Department has provided a rule, interim final rule, that addresses how we are allowed to use those funds. So we covered those guidelines back on August 23rd, and additionally, we provided you with some recommendations for how to use those funds based on requests that we'd received from the various departments. At the time, we received some feedback from Mayor Council at the August 23rd work session for some additional information, and that has been provided as part of your packet, and I'll just kind of walk through what those pieces of information were that you requested. So we did receive, or you asked for information about the budget requests, the details of those budget requests. And in your packet, we've provided those details. So it's about 70 pages of details on what the departments requested, kind of what the goals were, the funding requested. So that information is in your packet. The second piece of information that was requested was you asked staff to go back and address kind of what were the immediate needs versus what could wait. And we've included that information in your packet as well. So here, these are the recommended items that we discussed back on the August 23rd work session. So you have the department, the priority that they assigned those items, the requested amount, the recommended amount, and then we took that recommended amount, the departments went back and evaluated their needs and came up with what they need immediately, what could wait till the third or fourth quarter of this fiscal year, and then what could be delayed until next fiscal year. So out of the total recommended amount of $5.6 million, the departments have identified about $1.3 million in immediate need, and the remaining $3.7 million could be delayed until the third or fourth quarter, and then we have a little over $500,000 that could be delayed until next fiscal year. Any questions about this part before I move on? The next piece of information that was requested at the work session addressed how other cities were using their ARPA funding. And this is also information that was provided in your packet. And just a little bit of a caveat here. So we've gathered this information based on, looking at internet searches, looking at documents that we found on this various cities' websites, as well as some contacts that we have in other locations. So some of this is considered proposed. It's just been initially discussed. It's not necessarily been adopted. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. And some of the amounts we've included are just approximate based on what we've been able to find. So as you can see, just to kind of quickly address this, Alpharetta, at least for now, is focusing on recurring capital, using their funds for recurring capital. The city of Dunwoody, from what we've been able to find, hasn't necessarily allocated all of their funds, but they've discussed as part of their budget process, which is a little bit later than ours, constructing a new park, as well as replacing some revenue in their general fund. That's the level of detail we've been able to find. Fulton County, they have pretty much allocated all of theirs to various programs, and this is kind of listed in order from largest amount to smallest. So a bulk of theirs is going to clearing the backlog in the court system, emergency rental assistance, pandemic proofing the county facilities, improving health infrastructure, IT virtual support, safety net services, testing and vaccination programs, food insecurity, PPE for county employees, long-term revolving loan program, and then other various programs that deal with childcare, extra cleaning, premium pay, job training. We were not able to find any information on Johns Creek. From our discussions with Milton, they're continuing their discussions as well, but they're talking about one potential new project, which was the construction of a new athletic complex. Peachtree Corners recently announced their council has actually approved the uses for their funds. So as you can see here, they are looking at grant programs for businesses and nonprofits for both capital and operating costs, a local shopping incentive program, funding for their urban redevelopment authority, funding towards broadband infrastructure for underserved areas, revenue loss, funds to help local businesses and underserved minority communities, a nuisance abatement program, utility assistance, and they're also setting aside about $100,000 to hire an outside firm to help them manage the whole grant process. So also no information was really available for Sandy Springs at this time. The next bit of information that you all requested had to do with public engagement. And we have worked with the Community Relations Division to come up with a public engagement plan, and we've included this in your packet as well. Basically what we've come up with is that, if we come up with this plan, the goals would be to increase public awareness of the ARPA funding that the city is receiving, what the eligible uses are, and to gather some public feedback regarding how best to use those funds. And so, based on recommendations from Community Relations, we'd kind of look at this in two phases. One would be just an initial phase to gather some information from the community and to educate them on what we've received, what it can be used for. And then there could potentially be some follow-up based on the feedback that we receive after that first phase. And Community Relations has recommended, a variety of media to use, whether that be social media, emails, and one thing in particular we talked about was a dedicated page on our website just to provide all the basic information about ARPA, what it is, what we're receiving, and the eligible uses. So that's kind of a summary of the overall public engagement plan that we worked with Community Relations to come up with. Additionally, at the last work session, you all asked for us to look at what needs exist in the community, and that's kind of the point of the public engagement plan, for us to be able to use this to assess that. And then finally, you all asked us to look at broadband access and what needs exist there. And that is something that is still a work in progress. We're meeting as staff right now to kind of look at what options there are and what needs exist. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Good presentation. Something that I would recommend or suggest when it comes to the public outreach plan is an example of what other cities have done or spent their money on, because I think when we put a pile of money out there and say, look, here's a pile of money, you're going to get a wild group of things that might not actually be doable. And so I think if you can see, certain things go to here and certain things go to here and certain things go to here, people will get more thoughtful in the response versus, hey, look, I want to build this giant grand thing versus spreading out the number. I don't know how we educate that as, something we look at as we look at different things throughout, and I think that would help the response be more usable. So just a suggestion, because I know when we've done things like build a bridge and we don't give a number, it's, we want golden rails and this and the other. So I think we gotta set expectations on this money, and I think probably put an example of how that looks so people know how to respond.
And thank you for that. And I think that in our conversations, there was going to be a lot of us setting context for people to provide them with, there are restrictions, there's this amount of money, kind of here's how the city's fared during the COVID pandemic. But I think those are all great suggestions for setting that context and setting some realistic expectations. So.
Another comment, Councilmember Playman.
So I thought one of the things that Roswell was eligible for was revenue loss placement. And then if that's the case, I thought it basically meant you're allowed to use it towards that, in which case it can go towards anything the residents want. Is that understanding accurate?
So yes, basically, revenue loss opens it up to be used for government services. There's a broad definition there. Maintenance, public safety, all kinds of things like that. So if we decide to use it, if we decide to go that route, then yes, there's a broad swath of things it could be used for. However, we wanted to be sure that we did. That's one of the 4 major categories that the ARPA funds can be used for. So we did want to make sure we kind of laid out what those other 3 were, but definitely providing kind of plenty of information so that people would realize.
Yeah, I guess just my concern would be by having the different items, let's just say, we found out that the majority of residents felt we really needed a new fire station. And if the first 3 buckets, don't have that opportunity, it just says revenue loss, they don't really know what that means. And then does that mean potentially, even though they passionately feel we need a new fire station, they're not adding that because they don't think that's eligible? I think it is important to show that really, due to the revenue loss that we've had and due to how the rules work, we are able, or at least we are allowed to purchase whatever really the residents think is best. Obviously, the mayor and council will use their judgment, but I think it is important we really are finding out what is the type of investment and the things that residents really want to see and really feel is a big need for the community.
And we would definitely, I think, provide that level of detail so that it wouldn't just be revenue loss, but people would know if we use this category, it opens it up to a vast array of options.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Ryan. I noticed that Dunwoody's using it as part of revenue loss, and that is a calculation. It's not necessarily that we lost revenue, but it's an opportunity. And I think that it is important to, perhaps in that category, just make it clear that we do have the option under a provision, under one of these 4 provisions, to put it into our general fund, so to speak, and use it for any purpose that we would use general funds for, just to make it that clear and simple. The other thing that I would request is if there'd be an opportunity through our website or somehow that residents could, and not necessarily interact, but see what other residents are posting as ideas, because sometimes if I see, I may not think of something, but if somebody suggests something, it might get me thinking in a different direction, and I find that helpful.
Thank you.
Any other comments or direction for Mr. Luckett? What you looking for?
Yeah, I think basically we were looking for guidance on being able to move forward with the public engagement piece. I guess the other question is if you all would prefer to totally wait on all the funding, or if you know, now that we know what the immediate needs are, if there's desire to move forward with funding the immediate needs, and then whatever is remaining up for discussion based on the public feedback. We could go either way.
Councilmember Hall.
Sorry, just one more thing to add. You might even put this up, the suggested, what the city departments had requested as an example of these are options, but here's all, we want the feedback from the citizens.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, Councilmember Zapata.
So I see in this list here, maintenance. Parks and Rec, $310,000 in maintenance. And again, I want to make clear that, this money shouldn't be used for maintenance. This money should be used for, one-time capital, infrastructure improvements. This should be already on the regular budget, $310,000 for Parks and Rec maintenance. So that worried me because we're not contemplating maintenance on the park. And if next year we don't get this, what are we going to do? That is a risk, to get used to use this kind of money to do something that we should be doing anyway in our regular budget. And I think we had the discussion last time as well and say, I think we shouldn't be using this for something that should be on the regular budget, like any maintenance on existing infrastructure. So that concerned me a little bit, that we're using this money to do something that should be on the budget, regular budget anyway.
Henry.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the conversation we had is that this should be used as capital or maintenance capital, not operating. That's the conversation we've been having, because this is a one-time infusion of capital or revenue into the city, so we can use it in revenue capital or capital, but not operating expenses. I believe that was the conversation we had.
Yes, so when we provided direction and presentations that we provided to you all, and when we provided directions to the department, the guidance was that this would be used as a one-time, source, and that we would not look to this to fund things that would add to our operating budget, recurring operating budget. We did, in the approved budget that got passed, there was a lot of maintenance that was unfunded, and this is seen, I think, could be used as a one-time source to help fund some of those gaps that were included in the maintenance and the budget that was approved for FY 2022. We as staff are working right now to prepare for the budget for next year to address those items so that those gaps don't exist, at least as much as possible. So.
Anything else from Mr. Luckett? All right, thank you very much. Thanks, Ryan. We'll move over to Recreation and Parks. Item number 9 is consideration for approval of the historic asset rental fee schedule and local vendor program. Dina Bush will be presenting this one.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm presenting consideration for approval and agenda vote for a new historic assets rental fee schedule and policy, as well as a vendor program policy. The overall purpose and priority, just a second. There we go, okay. The overall purpose and priority for this program is, one, to establish cooperative programs and events. We also want to make sure that we're including meeting space for city functions. This also means rental venues for third-party events, as well as the potential for film and media productions, which we've already had a little bit of a conversation about that tonight. The reason why we're presenting this again is because recently the historic assets have undergone a staffing restructure. And one of the decisions that we made was to bring Susie McCoy, who oversees Roswell River Landing and the Old Mill Machine Shop, underneath my division of historic assets. Collectively, we thought there was a value in taking the specialty venues of River Landing, Old Mill Machine Shop, which is a historic structure, has that history associated with it, in conjunction with the other historic assets, so that as we move forward and we open this up, from a customer service standpoint, clients, potential renters, only have one point of contact to go to have all the questions answered and to discuss an agreement, discuss their event with one staff member for multiple sites. So that would include Barrington Hall, Bullock Hall, Smith Plantation, upcoming Mimosa Hall, as well as now Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop. So we think that that is going to be a major benefit. Of course, all of this, we are anticipating, and we're looking forward to Mimosa Hall and Gardens opening up very, very quickly, very soon here. And at the same time, we're presenting a new proposed vendor program, which we hope will spark local business collaboration and partnership. And all of this just, again, speaks to the necessity for us to come back to Mayor and Council to review the overall historic asset rental policy and the fee structure and this concept of a vendor policy. So if you turn to page 148 in your packet, if you're following along, you will see the proposed rental program policy. And I just very quickly want to speak to some highlights. There are some restrictions to use for a rental event. For one thing, in terms of commercial use, unless is authorized as a city-sponsored event, has gone through the permitting process, or if it's part of a film or media production, historic assets, the rentals venues will not be used for commercial purposes. We also want to make sure that there is not inadvertent competing with city purpose. We will reserve the right to restrict activities that are deemed inappropriate or competing with city function or even the interpretation of the sites. And again, we do not want to compete with activities or events that we may be doing with our program. And also, which has been placed previously, is that we want to make sure there's non-use for regular meeting practices by religious organizations or just multiple meeting practices. The general hours overall for the rental program, particularly when we're talking about historic assets and historic homes, are Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to midnight, Friday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. And then, of course, media and filming hours will need to be individually negotiated with that. The film request and everything that follows will need to go through the city permitting process with each application. And each application is evaluated by city staff as to the way that impacts the site and the needs. I will also say in terms of filming and media that we have separated exterior fee structure versus interior fee structure. You will see this on your fee schedule. The exterior filming rates are the same as listed on the general rental rates as any third person that would want to come on site and reserve the grounds. But interior filming rates, which means getting inside one of the homes. And just recently, I'll give you an example, we were able to do this at Barrington in conjunction with Chris Ward and her division. But the interior filming rates would be a separate list, as you see. And it also takes into consideration for staff time compensation and collections management and care for preparing the site. So we do definitely want to make sure that that is into consideration. You will also see, as part of the policy, city presidents and department presidents permitting staffing requirements such as officers, attendant needs for supervision during the actual event, as well as during the policy language that speaks to, of course, smoking, behavior, music. We want to make sure that all rentals are following city ordinances and code, excuse me. We also have language that speaks to marketing and promotional use. In other words, a third-party individual coming onto our site and using it for an event or a rental. If they want to use an image of our site, they need to receive permission. And we certainly want to make sure that they're not using the City of Roswell name or our logo for any promotional or media marketing use without our knowledge and without our permission. And we also, I have this on here at the bottom, we also are maintaining just a COVID-19 statement, which speaks to the current Georgia law that I think we're all familiar with seeing so far. So what I would like to do now is to briefly go through each site. Each historic asset location, they do have their own various venue options with multiple rentable spaces. The next few slides, I would like to briefly review each of the options and the general fee schedule explanation. As I do, it may be helpful if you refer to Exhibit A through D on pages 156 through 159 in your packet. These are a series of site maps that shows just a bird's eye view of the venue location and whether they are considered interior or exterior spaces. So Barrington Hall first, that map is located on page 156. Barrington Hall contains what we see as 4 different options that may accommodate anywhere from 30 to 400 people. You see them listed as the barn, the front lawn. Let me go back. The barn is the gray structure, if you're familiar with Barrington Hall. It is the gray structure at the back of the property that is sometimes known also as the carriage house. But we have the barn carriage house, the front lawn, which is in front of the house, the east garden, which is the formal antebellum garden to the east, immediate to the east, that back lawn. And we also have a full site rate if you wanted to rent the entire location. As you can see, this can go anywhere from $50 per hour during the weekday. We have that hourly rate that is distinguished between the weekday as well as the weekend. One thing that I would like to clarify on this grid is the wording of NA, non-applicable, open hours. Staff feel that these spaces where you see that, these spaces are impaired enough to the public tours and operations that hosting a rental event would be too intrusive. Therefore, we're making the decision not to be open for an hourly rental rate during public operational hours. However, if a potential renter or perhaps, for example, a film production wish to rent the entire site at that full day rate, we would choose to close the entire site to the public for that rental and that activity. So I just want to clarify that. So that means, for example, the front yard, we would not want an event taking place right in front of the house of Barrington Hall or any of the historic homes while the house or the public may be trying to enter. So Bullock Hall, the map is on page 157. As you can see, the site capacity is somewhat familiar to Barrington Hall, and it can accommodate between 30, less than 30, all the way up to 300 people total. And again, we would not want to rent out the front yard in front of the house, nor in the interpretive areas of the service yard for hourly rental during these public hours. And it has many different spaces. The Osage Room and Brick Courtyard is underneath the administrative offices at Barrington Hall, very close to beside the pavilion. So we have the Osage Room and Brick Courtyard, the pavilion. Orchard Hill is the space to the north of the property that encompasses the pond. And Mitty's Garden is in the opposite direction. Mitty's Garden is the garden area directly behind the gift shop. And of course, the front yard, the service yard where the administrative offices are, and the interpretive exhibits and carriage house. And then we also have the option of the full site. So Smith Plantation, this venue, that map is on page 159. I think it is our opinion that Smith Plantation is a wonderful opportunity for a smaller gathering, since the location does not have the space to accommodate bigger events, nor do they really have facilities for rentals. So we are focusing on the opportunity of the front lawn, which we feel can hold about 50 people if you want to do, for example, a small wedding in front, as well as the pavilion. And then we're offering, too, a full site option if you wanted to rent the entire location. Also, let me mention during this time that we are not considering third-party rentals of the historic house interior, so inside Barrington, Smith, or Bullock at this time, due to where potential negative impact on the facilities and the collections, just in an effort to be a good steward of city assets and the exclusion of food and drink within interpretive spaces, as well as limiting the amount of touch and the moving of collections, that just remains top priority. This exemption, of course, will be the consideration of filming productions or media productions requests where it's already a professional environment, and logistics and the environment itself just can be much better controlled and managed. As you can see from the fee schedule, it will also require compensation for collections management and staff time to manage that. And then, of course, Mimosa Hall. Part of this whole conversation, this is why we're particularly excited about Mimosa Hall coming online very soon as our newest rental and event program space. The map of Mimosa Hall is on page 158. One of the things that I would like to highlight, of course, is just the options. We have the first floor. We are very, very close to obtaining a certificate of occupancy for the first floor. So we'll be in the first floor of Mimosa Hall and that interior. We also are considering the front lawn, the reflecting pool lawn, which that will include what used to be the pool space. That now, the removal of that pool and that liability has created a wonderful opportunity for a mid-size event into that area, going over into the Neil Reed reflecting pool area. And then, of course, the full side. One of the other things that we're considering, if someone wants to come in, because Bullock and Mimosa are adjacent, if someone wanted to come in and have a much bigger event, they could, and they could rent out both Bullock and Mimosa Hall as a complete unit package. So we do definitely want to make sure that that is an opportunity as well. I would like to mention that we're looking forward to the Mimosa grounds being open and for next month, and the ability of the public, of course, to enjoy that and use the grounds just as they do with the other historic properties, and I think that's important as we're pulling this together. The grounds are generally open to the public during daylight hours, even if the houses are closed. So that will be occurring with Mimosa as well. Access to Mimosa, as well as any of the historic assets when it comes to a connection with staff inquiries, it will all operate the same as it has been with the other venues, such as River Landing or Old Mill Machine Shop. Interested renters will need to make an appointment and meet with Susie McCoy or other staff as available to discuss details and potential rental agreement. So, as you see with the structure, with the fee schedule and cost, we are going to charge a deposit, two types of deposit, a non-refundable reservation deposit, which will go to their final balance, as well as a refundable damage deposit. And everything is okay and they leave everything in order, that is refundable. There are other direct costs, such as the officer fee if alcohol is being served, The renter will also have to expend costs towards potential tables, chairs, tents, other event rental costs. There's also going to be the attendant fee as well. And we would like to establish a $150 cleaning cost to help offset that. And if they do choose to want to open the house during their event for a tour for their guests, we do want to make sure that's available. We will have to charge on that, depending on how big the size it is and how many staff members we feel like we will need to man the house during that. In terms of hours and discounts, for the hourly rate, we do want to keep that to a 4-hour minimum, 10-hour maximum. We also wanted to establish a meeting rate because we recognize that there are groups and organizations that would just enjoy coming on the historic properties and using it as a meeting space for their various organizations. And we want to make that as available as possible. Particularly with Mimosa, we're anticipating a great deal of interest in that. So we're thinking that one way we can offer that is a meeting rate of Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If it's 25 people or less, you can reserve that for 3-hour maximum, just a $75 flat rate. We are also offering discounts. You've noticed that many of the houses, they have multiple options, multiple spaces. So if you rent more than one, you'll receive a 10% discount. If you're a Roswell nonprofit, we will offer you 10% discount. If you are using local Roswell businesses, and we'll refer to this in just a little bit, we will offer a 10% discount as well, but the discount will be capped at a total of 20% off. So however you want to formulate that, if more than one are applicable. We also, during this time to look at this, we did see what local venues were doing. We also tried to research venues and historic sites that were using their facilities for rentals. And I'll just mention that very quickly here, if you don't mind, I'll bring that up. So we did do a price comparison. I'm sorry, in your packet, I think a little bit of it got cut off. But this was somewhat difficult because it's hard to know. You have to really do research to see if you're comparing apples with apples, because each venue is different. Each venue is offering different sources and services than others. But we looked at Roswell venues. I also looked at if they are a museum or cultural center versus if they're an actual historic house, historic structure. As you know, in Roswell, many of our venues happen to be historic houses that have been converted into venues. We also looked at other locations locally, as well as venues that we thought were comparable, such as close to Savannah, where we have another plantation-style venue. Atlanta History Center was very relevant in what they're doing. That was pretty comparable. And so looking at what they were doing, how they were operating, how many people they can accommodate, the type of limits that they were placing on their rentals, we feel like we are hitting a comfortable comparison in between there for what we are offering. We also, of course, looked at within the department what it is that we already offer too. But if anyone has any questions about this specifically, I'll be happy to address that. Okay, so let's discuss the interior filming and media productions fee schedule. For an interior use filming, based off of our own research, also what Chris has already established with her division, we are looking at $2,500 per day with a 12-hour day limit. A $40 attendant fee will be required. An officer fee will be required based on the permitting process and what the production needs. And if they are wanting to film in one of our historic homes, they're wanting to use the space that impacts collections, they will be required to cover all costs associated with packing and moving. And working with the CVB, we're trying our best to figure out how to make that as seamless as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we're very excited about Mimosa, because collections are not involved. And I think if a production comes into town and they're looking for that historic ambiance or that type of venue, Mimosa is a perfect location to come into. It's already basically a blank canvas for that, so we hope that the opportunity picks up. But if it does involve collections, we are requiring them to cover that cost as well as staff time, because it will take staff time to organize that and to oversee that. But again, any filming will follow city permitting procedures. The exterior filming fee rate will be the same as the rental fee structure for the exterior. And we will continue to maintain, a city right of refusal. We just want to make sure that whatever the production is doing does not contradict overall city mission and goals nor overall interpretation of the site. Okay, so the Historic Assets Rental Program, Vendor Program. This is something new that we are asking for consideration. The overall purpose of this is to promote Roswell business in partnership with local and regional vendors while ensuring the care of Roswell historic assets. We see the value in starting this type of vendor program because it establishes further relationships with local regional vendors, and it familiarizes those vendors with our historic assets and our particular requirements. We anticipate that this will enhance the overall customer service experience on the part of the renter as well, and honestly lower the stress on the part of the staff attendant in terms of vendor expectations and communicating our expectations in advance and what their activity may be. And we're also discovering that this is really the norm for most vendors, particularly vendors associated with historic assets. They will have some type of preferred vendor program. Staff, we're also looking for ways to promote local City of Roswell businesses through an additional discount to the renter if they use at least 50% of local services. Even if a local venue may not be able to accommodate a client per se for a specific date at their venue, we hope maybe that perhaps they can still be part of the business by potentially offering their services, if at all possible. Our aim is not to compete with local businesses, but by not being a full-service venue, and to direct clients to these local businesses and these companies through an incentive. Renters may elect to use any vendor they wish to, but they will be responsible for communicating regulations and to pay a non-use fee if they choose not to use any local businesses at all. For our vendors, there's no charge to participate in this program. The only requirements is an application, to sign an agreement form, and to attend an orientation meeting, networking meeting, where we all meet together. We discuss the specifics of operating within our facilities and make sure they understand our expectations. This will renew on a 2-year calendar basis. And again, as I mentioned, renters, potential clients can use any vendor they wish. If they choose not to use any local businesses, there will be a $100 flat fee. But if they use 50% of local services, we will offer a 10% discount. So thank you very much. At this time, Recreation, Parks, Historic, and Cultural Affairs requested a council agenda vote to approve, the historic assets rental policy and fee structure, as well as a new vendor policy. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Councilmember Zapata.
So thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. The first one is on the slide of policy and consideration, page packet 162. So you said use restrictions, non-commercial use. What is the definition of non-commercial use? Because then I see later on filming and media production, and it seems to be commercial, because they will sell the movies probably.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The exemption is the filming. Have to get used to that. So you're exactly right. The exemption would be for filming or media productions that is a commercial enterprise, as well as another exemption would be any third party such as a nonprofit that is a city-sanctioned event. That would be an exemption as well, if it is a city-sanctioned special event. Such as, for example, like the Mimosa Festival that occurred 2 years ago, pre-COVID.
So let's say that
Here, I'll trade you. Yep.
So let's say that a local dealership wants to do an event with the VIP customers. It's not allowed. A local dealership in Roswell who wants to bring VIP customers for a presentation of a new X model, blah, blah, blah. So they won't be able to rent this venue?
That would be considered a rental of the venue. I think I got that. That would be considered a rental of the venue, but they wouldn't be able to actively sell that vehicle on the site. So they could have a party and rent the site for a VIP party, but the actual sale of that product on the site wouldn't be allowed. That would be considered the commercial use.
So they cannot take pre-orders on the site, technically. Tesla, let's say Tesla, new model coming in, the SUV, and
Yeah, I think we would have to look at, are they actually conducting business on the site, or are they taking orders, and make a determination on whether that crosses the line of commercial use at that point. What we want to be careful about is we're not using public property for the leverage of commercial sales on the site, and have that careful balance between what's appropriate of a private event versus the commercial use of our property.
okay, great, thank you. So the next one is the 18 months advance reservations. This is to guarantee the spot, but if it's available tomorrow, someone will be able to rent it out?
That is correct. Okay.
So the 18 is to sure guarantee you.
That's correct. So we would not accept a reservation or a booking for an event that, for example, is 2 years out. 18 months is that marker. Now, if someone were to come and they want to do a rental next week, if we have the capability of that, that's perfectly fine. The only distinction is that they have to pay all of their fees, sign the contract, and pay all the fees if they're trying to book a rental under 30 days.
Great, thanks. My next question, I saw different kind of discounts, one of the last slides, I believe. And I didn't see anything for Roswell taxpayers or residents. I don't know if I missed anything there, but there's something you discuss about it, giving Roswell taxpayers / residents a deal on renting any of these public facilities?
Sure, we have not discussed that this time, but if mayor and council would like to discuss that, be happy to consider it.
And my last question, do you have, because all these fees that you're describing per asset, per historic asset, are the current fees or new fees? Well, I know some of them, Mimosa might be new because, but the other existing one, are they new fees or from 2019 fees still?
They are basically the same fees that have been in the past, with some minor adjustments where we thought it was relevant. I tried to see from city minutes where a fee structure has been brought to council before, and unless I just missed it, I could not find it. So that was one of the other reasons, because we're doing so many changes to this program, it was important for us to bring to mayor and council so that you knew what we were proposing, what we
Oh,
wanted.
great information, because also what I would like to see is in 2019, how many rentals do you have for each of them, for the pavilion, the orchard,
Yes.
hills, the front yard, backyard, full site? I think it will be important for council to know in 2019, with these fees, how many rentals out of 365 days in a year, how many days were rented. So we see the level, first the level of utilization of the historic assets, and second is, are those fees at the reasonable price that, people will really enjoy these facilities and events or not. So I think that it will be important to know the usage in 2019 of the facility. Thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
don't want to break it. Thank you. It's a great presentation, very thorough. I appreciate it. So I guess I'll mention first, since Councilman Zapata brought it up, I don't know how this council feels, but I would prefer to see if you're a Roswell taxpayer, Roswell resident, whatever it might be, even if it's just a 5%, just something, since their tax dollars did buy
Sure.
our historic assets. So I suggest that for this council. And then, thank you for clarifying. So the 18-month is a maximum amount of time, not a minimum amount of time.
Yes.
Yep, so thank you for clarifying that. And then my last question, and really the big question I had, is as you went through this, was there any collaboration or discussion with CVB that was here earlier to just make sure that we are competitive for the filming aspects as well as just other aspects, as we're hopefully bringing in a lot of paying customers into Roswell?
Yes, sir. There has been much conversation regarding that. In fact, 2 years ago, before COVID, one of the first major things that I did as part of the task force was to reach out and spend a little bit of consulting dollars with an individual from Savannah and part of that film commission to really answer that question. And this was an individual that she's currently a museum director, but in a previous career, she was also a producer. So I was able to find someone that I felt had a foot in both industries and able to direct us to that. So all that was part of this consideration too.
Great job, thank you.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and thank you for a very thorough presentation. I appreciate and appreciate all the work that went into coming up with that rental program. A couple of questions that I had. Is the definition of city-sanctioned events, I mean, as you were going through this, I thought of several events that have been regularly held on these properties, and I weren't sure if they were, how they would be impacted by this.
Yeah, I think the definition of city sanction, and we can double check the policies, and Dina, you may know off the top of your head, but it essentially is anything that we as the city or department are promoting and organizing. And we have partnerships that we create, obviously with our friends groups. We have partnerships that we create with various nonprofits in order to support their activities. But generally what we're looking for is those co-equal goals of things that are being conducted on parks property as well as the historic asset property that become part of either our department brand. And I'll use the Arts Festival that's coming up with our Roswell Recreation Association this coming weekend. That we consider a city-sanctioned event. It's fundraising for our therapeutic recreation programs and some of our other scholarship programs on city property in partnership with the association. And those kind of fall into those types of categories.
Okay. I guess some that came to my mind were like, and they may already be paying fees, but things like the garden fair and the lavender festival and the ice cream crank and those things. So.
Sure. The Lavender Festival, just to use that example, that's actually a historic assets department event. So that's not actually a third party throwing that. I see the distinction as where you have that agreement by both parties and it's understood that it's a partnered event. And so you're going to see the city branding, city logo, all that process go through community relations as part of that. And that expectation, that agreement is signed and agreed upon from the very, very beginning. And even if it is a third party, such as the Mimosa Festival, I think of that as another good example that happened a couple of years ago too.
I just want to see that clarified a little bit more. The other thing is a little more clarification on what the vendor program is.
Go ahead. So the policies are also included in the packet on the vendor program, but really the intent is to include any local vendors within our community that hold a business license in the city of Roswell would and could qualify under that program. And so if you were having a VIP party and you were using florists and caterers and parking attendants and anything else along with the production of that event on the property, so long as 50% of those vendors were Roswell residents, you would qualify qualify for that 10% discount on all of the fees associated with it. Really, the intent of driving the opportunity for local businesses to partner with us in order to achieve that discount, and they could self-register under the vendor program and then be available to anybody that's looking at the properties, the historic assets.
Okay, so
that
they
make
would
sense?
be a part, yes, so they would be a part of planned special events, not an ongoing effort to pop up a tent or something to sell, so, okay.
And to give you a quick example, like, let's say there's someone that is hosting their wedding at Mimosa Hall.
Right.
A wedding's going to probably have an event planner, hopefully, from my standpoint, an event planner, a florist, a caterer, a baker, a videographer, probably a DJ, so on and so on. If 50% of all those vendors, all their services are local to Roswell, that's what we're trying to incentivize, and to do that with this discount.
Go to Councilmember Zapata and then Councilmember Hall.
Not a problem. So, yeah, I was also following up about the vendor program. So can you have more than one florist? If there is two florists in Roswell and both companies apply, they both will be there, both will have the opportunity to promote and close a deal?
That's exactly right. There would be no limits on that. If a renter wanted to use more than one florist, more than one DJ, more than one photographer, they're more than welcome to. That's no problem.
Okay.
We'll have multiple on the list.
Yes, and we'll
From
have
Roswell,
multiple, yeah.
from by category or by industry or whatever on the list, okay. So,
And to provide a little bit more clarification on that, the piece of information that I'm anticipating handing to the renter will be organized by the type of service. So you would see florist, baker, caterer, and whatever vendor wants to participate in the program, they would be listed. We would make sure to distinguish and highlight a Roswell business, and so they could use anyone on that list that they chose to.
great. And then, I will be making a motion, but, so this will come again, assuming that this passed today, will be coming to mayor and council, right?
That's correct.
So when these come, I really would like to see again on 2019, the number of events, because, we're going to be approving here the rental fees, but we don't know much of, are those really on target? So you get the right amount of reservation and use throughout the year or not? It's too much, too little, just right, perfect. So I think that the fee by itself, without knowing in context how much is used, the facility, and which of all the different options per historic asset, it's hard to determine if it's a fair fee or it's a right fee or not. So, since it's going to come to council, I will, make a motion at some point to approve this, to go to council, but I would like to see the uses there so we really have a better understanding if it's the right rental fee or not that we have.
And I appreciate that point. I will say it feels a little bit that we are starting this program brand new, because when I came on board 2019, there was no effort really toward rentals at Smith. Bullock, Friends of Bullock handled those rentals. I can try to look into that information for you. Barrington was a little bit more stronger in the sense that the previous site coordinator did task a part-time employee to kind of oversee rentals, but they were still trying to kick that off the ground. So what I am seeing is a major opportunity for us to reorganize this and restructure it, particularly now that we're bringing all the historic assets together along with the River Landing and the Old Mill Machine Shop. I think there's a unique opportunity to really market that and brand that as Roswell's specialty venues and that ambiance, and to help start this process and that program. So to that business function, to your point, to carefully track that data and those numbers. But coming back to council, I'll be happy to share what information I have.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Great presentation, a lot of information. I have two questions. The first one is I'm not familiar with how many of these fee structures are new, the 9 to 4, 4 to 12, 4 to 1, 9 to 1. One of them that you noted was the daytime rental, flat fee $75 for a group that wants to meet. Is something like that available for a group that might want to meet for, say, early evening cocktails, a neighborhood group or something like that? Or does that fall into the hourly rate where you're getting into the heavy hourly hours?
It would just depend on what time of day they wanted to rent that. And that cutoff in terms of the fee is really our operational hours, if I understand you correctly.
So my specific example would be, say, a group wanted to have a 6 to 10 o'clock event,
Sure.
and it's a meeting, and maybe it's a BYOB or something
Sure,
like that.
sure.
Would they be subject to the $150 an hour
That's
category?
correct.
Okay,
That is correct. That's the hourly rate.
okay, that,
Just a secondary comment to that, the challenge also with any city property, even if it's a bring your own, then there's, Roswell Police Department is required to be there at that point, with alcohol when it's on site, at any of our properties.
okay, or maybe even if they don't BYOB,
Right.
it's still under the hourly rate. if
Correct.
You're gonna do
Correct.
that event. Okay. And the second question is, where are these funds booked now in our budget?
So the funds that are for specialty rentals of the historic assets are reinvested into our interpretive programs. They're currently booked into, and I can double check this, I believe they're booked into the Recreation Participation Fund, and then they're categorized into the historic assets. I'm gonna double check over my shoulder with Jimmy. Okay. I had it backwards. Sounds like it goes in the general fund, but we'll double check, and then when we bring it back to council, make sure that we have that right.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Councilmember Judy?
Quick, because I think we've belabored this enough. Do we have a statement in our contract that says, should we all of a sudden be watching something or something show up on YouTube or something that was filmed there, that we have the right to ask them to request to take it down should it be against the policies we stated beforehand? Because, you're not going to have somebody there on site all day watching the filming and all of a sudden something shows up. There probably should be something that says, you can't, we have the right to request you to take it down. I don't know, Mr. Petty, if that's possible, because I think we could do that.
Are you speaking specifically to filming productions?
Filming and production.
Okay. I will say that between our team, there's a pretty in-depth vetting process. We're asking for their synopsis, we're asking for their theme, we're asking specifically how they're setting up the shoot. So we're able to ask those questions to be able to determine that, to, I think, address that concern. But in terms of after the fact, I would have to defer to legal on that.
Any other questions for Ms. Bush? Councilmember Zapata?
Motion to approve
So I have a motion
item number 9.
I'm sorry. Motion to approve item number 9, which was the policies and the fees that were set forth for the historic assets by Councilmember Zapata. I have a second. A second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. That was a lot of good information, so I appreciate you hanging on and going through that. Next item on the agenda is consideration to award a contract to Brandstatter Carroll Inc. for professional services for the Historical and Cultural Affairs 5-year master plan. Mr. Leatherman?
Yep. Just bring up,
I'm sorry.
sorry. Thank you. The item that we have before you tonight, we have a consideration to award the contract for our 5-year park master plan. We initiated the procurement process after we received funding in the mid-year budget process from last fiscal year to initiate our 5-year master plan. This is also an outcome of the citywide strategic plan in order to look ahead over the next 5 years, specifically at our strategic plan, but then also looking even a little bit further ahead, and I'll show you on the next slide kind of our intent with some of the look ahead that we're doing at 10 years and 30 years. In March, we accepted the applications from our department to sit on our strategic planning process. We have a couple of those members here. Nick Pasurcio is back here in the corner, Andy Grumbel is here, and Jimmy Onolovich is here. They're part of our administrative team that worked on the scope of work. And then by extension, we have our community engagement and public outreach team lead that will be working with our consultants should this contract be approved, our staff and feedback engagement team, which is Kristen Sparrow, and then our implementation and execution team, which is Dina Bush. And by extension, we have 3 or 4 other staff members that are assigned to each of those teams as we work our way through our 5-year strategic planning process. And so thanks to the group that's here from our department that really helped us put this scope of work together. And this took some time in looking through our citywide strategic plan, but also looking at some industry standards and then some goals and objectives that we have as a department to ensure that we're positioning the city of Roswell and specifically our services over the next 5 years with some of our goals and objectives, but more specifically looking at a 10-year park and facility development repurposing plan where necessary, meaning are we underutilizing our facilities in any way, or can we look at leveraging facilities differently, potentially to take on more activities. For example, we're seeing new sports coming on board alongside of our esports program. Cricket is becoming very popular in our community right now, and so do we need to look at repurposing any of our existing facilities for some of those purposes, as opposed to building new facilities? And then also looking at our 30-year planning for park and land acquisition as we start to talk about redevelopment in our community, looking at our census data, what does that park land standard look like 30 years down the road? And do we need to be looking at recommendations for consideration by mayor and council for potential future parkland acquisition in order to support our current standards, not just today, but also 30 years down the road. And also the equity, inclusion, and support for underserved community groups. This is an element of our strategic planning process of understanding what our underserved communities looking for within our park, recreation, and cultural historic assets that we're not reaching. We're starting to see, I'll use our Dia de los Huertos program that came on board a couple of years ago before the pandemic. What a great success that was out the gate, understanding that our Hispanic community is looking for events and activities. We see in our current census data that community is growing. What are we doing to position the department to understand their needs, expectations, but also the future growth? And so that's the complete portion of the scope of work. The procurement memo is included in your packet. We did go through the traditional procurement process, and we have a recommendation to award in the amount not to exceed $95,000 to Brand Sitter Carroll to assist us with this process. And we'd like to move that forward to Mayor and Council.
Any questions for Mr. Leatherman?
Yep.
Councilor Playman.
Thank you. So I guess I see you definitely have a large team of all-stars that are kind of team leads and help put together the scope of work, which is fantastic. I guess just help me understand the benefit that's provided by these outside consultants for $95,000 versus having our experts in-house kind of lead this, and then we get to use that $95,000 on basically park maintenance that we underfunded.
Yeah, great question. I think the benefit significantly is the intensity of focus on the planning effort over a short period of time in order to get a plan in hand that we can start to leverage and use now. If we were to spread this out over a 2 or 3 year period, if just staff was working on this and trying to engage in all of those elements of the scope of work, I think that is probably one of the biggest elements that we see on the return on investment is the timeliness of the public input process. We also have some significant engagement that takes some technical expertise in understanding the community demographics, looking at our past master planning processes, benchmarking that against the industry standards and then making recommendations based on the community input. Our community input process includes things like surveys. We have a statistically valid survey that's included as part of this process so that we're not only reaching those that are engaged in our community, in our community input process, but also people that may get missed in those traditional needs and methods. And so we want to make sure that we're using a firm that can provide that validation to our public outreach process that we can't do in-house. And then we also have the benefit of looking beyond our team of experts into the industry of people that are working amongst other community groups and other locations, and getting that expertise of what we're seeing around the region, around the United States on best practices, not only comparing them to the standards, but also to those best practices that the community and various communities such as North Carolina, Charlotte, and others that these consultants have worked with that can bring that experience into the city of Roswell and advise us as a 100,000 person community, maybe what some of the larger communities or more dynamic and diverse communities are, and bring that experience to staff alongside of us.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. So, yeah, a little bit on the same line of Councilmember Palermo. Thank you for all of you for the time you put and efforts to get this. It's important. But, $95,000 is so hard to see in here when we have $310,000 under fund basic maintenance. And also, I know that is on, I don't know the status of the assessment plan for existing infrastructure to see where they are, what they need to get update and upgrade. Seeing 5 years master plan when something basic maintenance is not funded for $310,000, and also when we see this assessment study of existing infrastructure, which condition they are, what they need, what kind of level of investment they need. It's very hard to think about $95,000 in a master plan when something basic is not covered. I don't know the urgency of this master plan, these deadlines. There is something legislated by the state, by the federal government that we need to have this every X number of years. But again, see this huge number here when we have so many needs, basic needs, uncovered and unfunded, is very hard.
Councilmember Wiltie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fisher. I think one of the reasons why we need to do this five-year master plan is because we have several new properties that have been acquired since the last master plan was completed. For instance, 7 branches, and I believe there are some others as well, that we need to go out to the public and develop a plan for future use. We also have the bike ped master plan and several other things that we have been working on over the past 4 years that I really think need to be incorporated into the planning process. I think planning, certainly maintenance and investing in the parks is essential, but so is planning, and so is going out for community input for that. So for that reason, I completely support this and think that we should move forward as soon as possible.
Councilmember Palermo.
So, it's definitely an important need. I think there's no question in that. I think it comes down to the timing, and I look at 2 aspects. One, we've got such expertise in-house. There seems to me there'd be opportunities that there are certain aspects here that we could do in-house. And more importantly, as I look at the earlier item we had from finance, I'm seeing basically needs were placed in immediate need, 3rd to 4th quarter need, and can delay to the next fiscal year. And I'm seeing within Parks and Rec, I'm seeing actually probably over $500,000 of immediate need. So there's a lot of immediate needs that can't even wait till the 3rd, 4th quarter. And I guess what I'm just wondering is, no question, this is valuable, this is important, but why is this an immediate need more so than the other item, the over $500,000 that were considered immediate needs, including Councilman Zapata brought up that the maintenance program was underfunded by $310,000, but I'm seeing another one for $50,000, $75,000, $52,000, $20,000, $135,000, all, quote, immediate needs, and that's where I just don't understand what prioritizes this over all those other, quote, immediate needs.
Sure. So the timing of this, 2021, at the end of this calendar year, is when our current 5-year master plan expires. And so that drives the timing of where we are with this planning process. We requested funding in the previous budget cycle, and that was kicked to mid-year, and so the funding was authorized for this at mid-year of last year. So that started to drive then our planning process associated with the 5-year strategic plan in and of itself, so that by the time the current one expires, and in conjunction with the outcomes of the citywide strategic plan, essentially it was all lining up very, very cleanly from that perspective. We didn't want to get ahead of the citywide strategic plan because we wanted to understand the goals and objectives of the council. And so we wanted to tuck this in right behind it because we knew that the one was going to expire that currently drives many of our goals and objectives. We also understand that through the planning process, as the community shifts in needs and expectations and demographics, that constant feedback to our community on how we plan for the future is important. And there's no question that we have needs within our major maintenance of our facilities. I mean, that is there, but we also have the need to be looking 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road so that we can be making budget recommendations consistent with your goals and objectives in the strategic plan, as well as the community's goals and objectives for our parks and facilities, and this is what that plan does. And so I understand that, from a policy perspective, it feels like we're trying to pick which one goes first. And that truly is this mayor and council's role and responsibility in managing the budget. The challenge for us is that we've got co-equal goals of looking out ahead and making sure that we're providing relevant information and feedback for those policy decisions. So we need both tools, and it can be a challenge to balance that.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. No, I mean, having a master plan is fantastic. Master plan for everything is great. It's like I say, people might be dreaming to retire in a beach home, but then they cannot afford the mortgage of where they're living right now. So it's great to dream, it's great to plan for the future, it's fantastic. But if you cannot afford the house today, how can you even dream to have a beach house tomorrow? So that is my practical view of this. Master plans are fantastic, needed and everything, but if you cannot take care of what you have today, $95,000 for 5 years master plan we don't even know if we have money to get there next year to maintain and get update and upgrade our park system aging from the 70s and 80s. So that is why it's so hard now to think about prioritize $95,000 for this when we are not prioritizing other things that residents and taxpayers can see effects now. So let's keep dreaming with master plan. It's fantastic, but let's think more today. What's the need today?
Councilmember Judy.
So I think what we're seeing here is a political game of move the shell. When you take the whole situation holistically and you look at it and you say, all right, well, this was unfunded, but we knew this money was coming, that we were going to fund the maintenance, and then next year we'll be caught up and everything will be fully funded. I don't think anybody at this table unfunded things knowing that it wouldn't be fully funded in the next 12 months. And going into the next budget season, it would be fully funded. So that's just a false statement on its core, because there's not a person here. I grew up in these parks from 4 years old. My son plays in these parks now. There's not a person at this table that would unfund the park's maintenance. What we're doing now is we're listening to our parks director come and say, I need this plan. He wouldn't come here and say, I need this plan if he didn't need the plan. So if I don't know why we're saying, you don't need the plan. We need this. We just went through a whole list of things, that there will be the $310,000 there, that it will be funded. Next year, I will support fully funding all maintenance. We knew how this was. This was a whole plan put together. This is not just, we did this just because. So this is political, move the shell. What we need to do is listen to our parks director, and we need to say, what do you want? And I ask you this question. If you think this is this important right now, then I'm all for it. If you think we can wait, then I'll wait. But I'm going to listen to my parks director and my staff, who knows what they need internally, and make a decision based upon that.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just, the $70,000 that was approved at mid-budget, was that the full amount that was requested?
Correct. We requested the $70,000 at mid-year, and as part of our negotiations, we wanted to include that statistically valid survey to validate the public input process. Just as we're watching, how do we create an opportunity to ensure that we're getting the holistic feedback across the community and not just those channels that are traditional to us? We added that on top of the $70,000 for your budget.
That's the 25,000 extra that
Correct.
wasn't approved.
Correct.
Councilmember Tyson.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall, for getting close to the answer that I was looking for. It looks like you're asking us to allow you to use some money that you were a good steward of and completed projects under budget to move to this project. Is that correct?
Correct. The $70,000 and including those other elements from last fiscal year in our capital project that would then fund the survey portion of this. Correct.
So I think, I just want to make sure I understand that. You can already, in the budget today, spend $70,000 on this, correct?
That was authorized already, correct. It still needed to come to council in order for approval.
For approval, but you're asking to move these 4 items into your long-range plan. Is that
Correct.
right? And these are monies that you were able to complete the projects that were previously authorized under budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Playman.
So, we can all say we hope there'll be funding for park maintenance in the future. And in fact, earlier today, there was discussion that we hope we can use a one-time federal grant to do maintenance, which is not a sustainable practice and is not fiscally responsible. So at the end of the day, we do have a choice here on what we approved $95,000 for. And at the end of the day, today, our parks are underfunded. Maintenance is underfunded. And again, I love a 5-year plan. I absolutely want to invest in a 5-year plan. But I can't look at residents and say we are not funding maintenance in our parks. We're going to hope to get federal grants to do that. But by the way, we are going to spend the money that could have gone towards funding our parks for a 5-year plan. And again, the city just does so many plans, but we don't actually execute. And I'm looking at the list right here where we're not executing on the maintenance programs or the historic house properties maintenance either. That's separate from the $310,000. That's an immediate need of $135,000. So again, I want this, but I don't see this as an immediate priority the way I see this list provided by staff of, quote, immediate needs.
Councilmember Tyson.
Thank you. I'm starting to get a little confused here. This is an item that is in an approved budget for $70,000. There's another $25,000 that completes the request from projects that were done. I also remember a request from a couple meetings ago to reduce the budget by another $900,000. And so I'm a little confused as to where we're at here. I'm of a mind to say, look, we've already litigated a budget, we've passed a budget. We know that there's approximately $12 million coming to us. That's a lot more than $310,000 if my math is right. We've got $70,000 in the budget. They've got a balance of $25,000 that they can use. If we don't take care of where we're going, how were we going to know when we're there? So I think it's time to not continue to litigate the budget. We've already voted on that. We've already voted on a millage rate. Some people wanted to take it down another $900,000, so I'm confused as to how we would pay for maintenance with even more money reduced, and I don't really want to have this argument. I think what we need to do right now at 5 minutes after 7 is decide, are we going to fund this item or not fund this item? And if we want to have a political discussion, perhaps we could do that after our next meeting, because right now, our staff is asking for approval for something they think is important. We ought to either give it to them or not give it to them and move on.
Councilmember Palermo.
I think this council made a mistake by funding $70,000 towards a 5-year plan, but cutting maintenance funding by $310,000. And so I think it's the opportunity for us to correct that mistake today and really start investing in actually maintaining our parks and not doing it with one-time capital money. And the whole discussion on the millage rate is for, I think, this exact great discussion, which is there's disagreement on how the money's been spent. So hopefully that answers your questions. I agree. I think we should vote on this, and I hope we'll move this $95,000 towards, quote, immediate maintenance needs that are not funded.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. So again, it's all related. You know, you have $70,000 approved, but still, our director said that he still have to come back to the final vote of mayor and council, correct?
Correct.
So we can still improve things. We don't have to keep, just going one direction. So, and then, again, our staff also recommends some immediately needs that they have to improve the park system. And we have to respect this too. So if it's a lot of things that they request that they believe that will improve the park system, will add value to the resident taxpayers, let's fund this. So I know that they're also asking for a master plan, but if it's not urgent, because we're not missing any deadline by state, federal, or county government, then what is the urgency of this? When, again, we have to prioritize, and the job of this council is to prioritize the needs presented to us by staff members, our staff. So there's two things here. One, that they requested, they were unfunded, and now something that they also requested and is funded partially. It's not total funded. So it's missing $25,000, I guess. So again, it's up to the council, and it's not political. It's just good judgment and prioritization. How do you prioritize? We can all prioritize differently. Can I continue? Thank you. So, no, it was interrupted, so I will continue. So, it's a matter of prioritization. You might call politics or whatever, I call numbers and prioritize. How do you prioritize it? And where those numbers and these scarce resources will have the highest impact to the entire community. So I see that the master plan is needed, it's fantastic, but I see also right now requested unfunded from the staff that will, I believe, that will have a high impact into the community. So that is the difference. It's not more than that.
Councilmember Hall. You good? Councilmember Judy.
So if we're going to prioritize things, let's do it. I'm going to bring in the next meeting the $310,000 out of ARPA to immediately fund the maintenance for Parks and Rec. So that can take that off the plate. We can be done with the $310,000. And then next time, what we'll do is we will go down the road of looking at the budget and what we need for next year based upon the plan and the needs of Director Leatherman, and we will fully fund the maintenance going into next year, because what we did know, again, this is all political posturing in an election year where you've got sitting council members running campaigns against sitting council members. So what's happening is this is political posturing. That's it, 100%. So we will fully fund the parks maintenance, those immediate needs you're talking about. Let's prioritize that right now. Let's all say, let's do that. We're going to do that. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to fund this plan, because our director said we need this plan. So let's vote on this. Let's get it done. Let's move forward. And we're going to fully fund all the maintenance, because we knew that money was coming. The $12 million that was coming, we knew it was coming. And you know what? We used the other stuff in a COVID pandemic emergency. Cover cost. Now here we are. So let's prioritize. Let's get it done. fully fund all the parks.
Councilmember Palermo.
So I think this is actually a great discussion of some disagreements on what is fiscal responsibility. We have a fiscal responsibility to maintain our parks every single year. It needs to be a part of our annual budget. Unfortunately, the majority of this council did not have the fiscal responsibility to fund the parks. So now I hear one that is in the middle of a political campaign saying that they want to use federal funds to bail them out for not being willing to actually sharpen their pencil and find a way to pay for our city's needs. And we should not be using a federal bailout because we're not willing to make tough decisions. It specifically says in that federal plan that it is not for maintenance things. And so what I've heard is it's changed to not being for operating, but at the end of the day, it should not be for maintenance. It should be for true capital, true different unique benefits to Roswell residents. And that's an issue. And just the other, quote, political things that you're bringing up, I don't think anybody's commenting on just your political behavior in other elections and all those aspects. That stuff is irrelevant. All that matters is what are the priorities for the Roswell residents? It's to fund our parks. It's not to create plans when we can't even afford to maintain our parks. And we should not just be relying on the feds to be bailing us out.
Is there a motion to approve the consideration to award a contract to Branstetter Carroll not to exceed $95,000? Because I think we've kind of gotten off of the topic, and it sounds like all the questions about the contract itself in this agenda item have been discussed. Do we have a motion one way or the other?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve this item number 10. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. That's Mayor Henry, Councilmember Wilsey, Councilmember Judy, and Councilmember Tyser. All opposed, raise your hand. It's Councilmember Hall, Councilmember Palermo, and Councilmember Tyser. Thank you. That motion passes 4-3.
On the no vote.
Hall, Palermo, and Zapata.
That's correct. You said all Palermo and Tyson.
My bad. Hall, Palermo, and Zapata were opposed. Councilmember Tyser was in favor. The next item is consideration for the mayor and/or interim city administrator to award a contract to Keller North America, Inc. for professional slope stabilization project in an amount not to exceed $325,000.
I'll be real quick on this item. This is also a contract request. We've gone through the procurement process. This is a slope stabilization project down near the machine shop at Old Mill Park. If you come down from the existing parking lot, this is a shot of the hillside next to the trail system. And we've gone through some engineering work. Here's kind of the proximity view of where that is. The slope is down the path towards the covered bridge there on the right-hand side. And looking for stabilizations, if you recall, about a year ago now, we had some significant erosion and some emergency repairs below and behind the machine shop. We've been looking at slope stabilization work on this hillside in particular, also for the past 18 months to 2 years as our secondary project for stabilization in order not only to preserve the trail system, but also the machine shop that sits below this area. The recommendations in going through the procurement process is, as opposed to a traditional kind of stacked concrete or brick wall, is to look for more of a shotcrete type system. This is an example of one in our community where you have the stabilization on a steep slope that is shaped and colored to look as natural as possible. This still provides the same type of slope protection that you would get in a stacked wall or a concrete wall, but provides the stabilization in such a way as to blend in with the natural environment. In your packet is our recommended, with the low bidder, Keller North America, with the contract not to exceed of $325,000, and a number of examples beyond this photo of similar types of projects that they have done, just to give you a sense of the work that we're envisioning here in this space.
Any questions or discussion? Mr. Leatherman, Councilmember Tyser.
Is this amount in the current budget?
This is funded with the exception of $16,000. So we had anticipated $255,000 in the hotel motel trail funding that was available. A remaining amount of $53,000 also in the hotel motel funding. So with our original request, when we asked for budget authorization, we estimated at $255,000. The low bid came back at the $325,000. And so you see additional motel authorization, as well as $16,000 in our capital project fund contingency project.
So, I'm sorry, the money for this is coming out of which fund?
Hotel motel, the vast majority, with the exception of the $16,000, would be coming out of capital project contingency.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zapata.
So I'm ready to make a motion.
I'm ready to take a motion. Go right ahead.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Councilmember Zapata. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyser. All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. We are at a hard stop of 7:15 right now, so I am asking for consideration for this committee to defer the final two items of the administration committee and the 4 items on the Public Safety and Public Works Committee until the Wednesday, September 29th committee meeting. They will be brought back up then. I have a motion. I have a motion to defer by Councilmember Hall. I have a second by Councilmember.
Actually, I have a comment I'd like to make. We have residents, citizens who have been waiting here for over 2 hours and 15 minutes to present on an item that was moved to the end of this agenda. I just want that to be on the record and to thank them for their time and for their contributions to the city. And I look forward to hearing from them on September 29th.
I understand
And we should have
that.
moved it to the beginning if I had known.
We absolutely should have moved it to the
I
beginning.
understand that, and I appreciate that, and sorry for the hard stop, but we have scheduling that we have another meeting at 7:30. All in favor, raise your hand. And that is Mayor Hen, that's unanimous. Thank you.